Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time we're talking about episode 13 of season 2 of Young Justice called The Fix. I gotta say, this is another really solid episode. There's a lot of balls in the air, a lot of cool stuff going on. The first thing though that I'd actually like to talk about is the title of this episode. It's one that works on a multitude of levels. We have Aqualad, who is in need of being fixed. We have Blue Beetle, who wants his Beetle neutered, which of course is commonly called getting fixed when we're talking about animals. And we have the Reach wanting to basically hook humanity on these drugs that they're slipping into their food so that we will always be dependent on them for another fix. And of course there's a question of, can our heroes fix this situation? I'm going to guess that the answer to it, at the very least that last one, is yes, but not until the season finale. It would be kind of funny if they did that in like episode 23 and they just sort of spent 3 episodes just sort of dicking around, like hanging out at the beach, like a beach episode, like you see in anime all the time. But anyway, big 3-part beach episode. Nothing but these attractive animated young folks running around in bathing suits. Tell me that would not sell like gangbusters. Seriously, come on. We all know what kind of folks watch this show. It's people who are just like you and me. Oh well. Alright, so let's got my notes right here. So let's start off by talking about how this episode starts off. And that is with a very unusual choice, and that in terms of style, and that is voiceover. This isn't really something that we've seen from this series before, and it's not really something that's terribly common in a lot of things nowadays. And a lot of this, of course, has to do with the long-standing Hollywood wisdom, quote unquote, that voiceover equals death. And this is basically the idea that if you have a movie that is voiced over, it will do very poorly at the box office. Now, this is sort of ridiculous. I mean, Hollywood has all these sort of myths about what will make a movie tank and what won't. One of which is female action movie leads don't work. Well, more recent, and that was true, of course, for many years, and I'm not really doing that very well. Yeah, well, this was basically something that was considered true for many years. When they did occasionally put things like that out, like the original American remake of La Femme Nikita, it tanked at the box office. But nowadays we've come along to the point where female action movie leads do make pretty decent money at the bank. No, not always. It's not a guarantee, but nothing's a guarantee in the entertainment industry. But that is something that really was a long-standing tradition in Hollywood. For example, if you're familiar with the movie Blade Runner, you know that there was a version of it that did contain voiceover, and it was ultimately basically just completely and utterly chucked from the movie. And Harrison Ford, of course, the lead guy in Blade Runner, and the guy who did all the narration, even said that he went in there, he said to them, okay, I'm going to read each of these lines 3 times. That's it. You choose the best one. I think this voiceover idea is stupid. Let's just get this over with. And yeah. Now, I can't say, I haven't seen the footage or anything like that, so I can't really tell you how Blade Runner would have been different if it had had voiceover. But in any case, Blade Runner's a badass movie, so apparently they did choose a reasonable path there. But I have gotten wildly off topic, and we're only a few minutes into this review. So let's actually talk about Young Justice here. Now, I did like the way they handled it. It wasn't overwhelming. They used it when they needed to. And of course, given that so much of this was Artemis having to really deal with only really having her thoughts and her reflection in the mirror as her only markers of her true identity, well, that really does drive all of that home. And getting into the plot with what was going on in the submarine, we see her, of course, again being very resourceful in the way that she deals with Simon, I have to admit that the way she cons Black Manta with the idea of Miss Martian planting some kind of a telepathic virus in him, it totally makes sense. I mean, that is a perfectly reasonable explanation. So, give Artemis a lot of points for really coming up with something really smart on the fly. But, of course, if she wasn't able to do that, then she would never have chosen this mission. We also see Artemis reflecting on her choice to go on this mission, lamenting that, she had gotten out of the game, she had a happy life with her boyfriend, but when Nightwing called, she jumped at it. That no matter how happy she was, there was still that longing for her old life within her. And when the chance came, she ditched the new one and came running back, and now it's really resonating with her just how much that choice is of a price that's extracting from her. And the fact that one of her closest friends is sitting in the next room, basically a vegetable, well, it's not really surprised that she's got some pretty heavy regrets going on. Now, another thing that I liked and I thought was actually really interesting was the interaction between Artemis and Black Manta. Now, it's kept fairly subtle, but it is implied that Black Manta thinks that Tigress was Aqualad's lover. And again, that really does help explain why she is given such a position of trust in this organization. Obviously, Aqualad would have vouched for her, but if she has that also going on, well, again, it makes a lot more sense as to why Black Manta would be willing to trust her. This is somebody who, as far as he knows, might potentially become his daughter-in-law. I mean, that's obviously going, a ways, but she's obviously extremely loyal to Aqualad. She's a heck of a fighter. She's deals with situations well. This is definitely somebody who exhibits a lot of traits that Black Manta would find admirable. So, again, she's giving Black Manta nothing but reasons to trust her. But Black Manta is no fool. I mean, look at the way the preparations he sets up to take out Miss Martian when they bring her onto the ship. She's got the collar, she's got Deathstroke ready to blow her away out of her telepathic range, and he's putting a highly trained bodyguard right next to her. So again, Black Manta is being presented as a very smart villain, very serious threat. We understand that we have to take this guy very seriously. Now, we've seen that he's somebody who's formidable in previous episodes, but here it's really getting driven home to us, which is of course really important because that makes the stakes of what's happening on that submarine that much higher, and really just reminds us that if this goes wrong, these guys are in so much trouble. Now, moving on to talk about some of the other things that are going on here, let's go and talk about Blue Beetle. Now, I really like that the way the situation with him and Green Beetle is set up. We're given, again, like Artemis, a lot of reasons as to why we should trust this guy. But I can't help but think, the way Miss Martian is really freaked out and doesn't want to go in there, he simply just says to her, well, how about I volunteer the information that you need rather than you going in there? Again, she agrees to this. So I can't help but think that maybe this is just a little too good to be true. That if this really is some kind of enormous elaborate setup, then whoever's doing it must have some really absolutely awesome knowledge of what's going on in poor Miss Martian's mind, because that's really hitting her exactly at the point emotionally where she would agree to do this. Now remember, this is basically her essentially psychically taking someone's word for it, when she is really supposed to be there using her powers to make absolutely certain that he's the real thing. But she doesn't do it. So you gotta wonder, is this going to come and bite the team in the butt? And especially after the idea that Green Beetle goes and tinkers with Blue Beetle's scarab. Now, apparently he's successful, and the Beetle is silenced. Jaime is completely and utterly in control. But if that stays the case, well, there's no drama in that now, is there? No drama at all. So, of course, there's no way this situation could possibly end badly for anyone. But, yeah, let's continue talking about Miss Martian, since she is one of the main characters in this episode. We finally get to see that her continually brushing off Lagoon Boy is catching up to her, and Lagoon Boy is understandably pretty upset about this. Now, I've not been the biggest fan of Lagoon Boy since the season started. I think I've made that rather clear. But here, you really do have to feel for the guy. His girlfriend is just completely blowing him off, and he has no idea why. And I do like it in this episode. He, despite his previously established nature as a hothead, here he keeps his temper for the most part when he's dealing with, well, basically when he's dealing with McGann, he keeps his temper in check. He's really being very sincere, being very honest. It's like, come on, just talk to me. I want to understand what's going on here. He is really being a perfectly calm, reasonable person. And honestly, I think that gives Lagoon Boy some depth he's really needed. He's emotionally hurt, and he's reaching out to this person that he dearly and sincerely seems to love, and she's just throwing walls at him. It's only, of course, when she's kidnapped and he has to deal with Superboy that he really starts to get freaked out. And of course, she throws some accusations in Superboy's face. And I really wish this episode had some time to sort of explore that a little bit more, but this all really has to take a back seat to Nightwing having to come clean with those two about the nature of what's really going on with Artemis really being alive and Aqualad not being a traitor and all this other stuff. And this really is a moment, an extremely important moment for Nightwing's character, because here we see demonstrated with crystal clarity that Dick has failed in a way. And I don't just mean with the current situation, I mean he's failed himself in a way. Think back to the episode where he has that counseling session with Black Canary, and he says that the thing that he fears, one of the things that he really fears most in his life, is becoming like Batman, or letting the worst aspects of Batman's character manifest in him. And by this I mean his unrelenting drive, I suppose, is not really actually that's not really the best way to put it. It is his inability to trust. This is one thing that's always really bothered me about the way so many modern writers write Batman, is that Batman always holds back his trust to at least some degree, even with his other superheroes, even with Superman, his closest friend, basically really in the world. Superman and Batman are really extraordinarily close friends, despite their often very, very prominent philosophical disagreements. And while it is understandable, I just don't really like that characterization of Batman. The idea that he just really cannot bring himself to 100% trust anyone. I mean, even members of the Bat family, he's been known to lie to them. And honestly, I think Batman should be a better person than that. Of course, Batman should be a very driven person, a person who plans for contingencies and all that. But if he is someone who cannot exhibit trust even in the people that he loves the most, it's of course a tragic character flaw and a very interesting one. But it's one that really hurts his credibility as a hero. Now, Superman, for example, may not be completely honest with, say, the people at the Daily Planet, like Jimmy and Perry, about him being Clark Kent. But can you honestly say that both Superman and Clark Kent would not completely and utterly trust Jimmy or Perry with anything but their most precious secret, a secret that could endanger the lives of Jimmy and Perry? And this is what all brings it around to what's going on with Dick. He has, despite his own desires, ultimately let the aspects of his mentor, the ones that bother him the most, have taken root and sprouted in him. He is not able to trust some of the people who are closest to him, his closest friends in the world. and now it has just gone disastrously wrong. Now, given the situation, of course, keeping this information to need-to-know basis makes perfect sense. But there's also you can keep it too close to the vest, and that if the circumstances change, if things go south, then people who would really be in a position to help you put things right, they aren't going to be in the know. And knowing is half the battle, guys. It's been old knowledge since the 1980s. But I think I've harped on this point enough. Let me see. Yes, let's speak of the Reach briefly. What I like about the Reach is that they play the long game. I can't remember what it was, but I read this science fiction story one time where basically the aliens unleashed like a virus on Earth, and what it was is it basically shut down people's ability to have children. Was that Babylon 5 or something like that? Okay, well, anyway, and the aliens just basically said, yeah, okay, you can't have kids anymore. We'll come back in 100 years when you're all dead, and then we'll take over the planet. Now, again, that's really the very bare minimum bones of what's going on here. But again, this is an example of aliens sort of using extremely long-term strategy in order to take down the human race, rather than the old standby of a bunch of ships come down and start blowing up New York and all this other stuff. Speaking of which, you ever notice that there are, except for Independence Day, there are very few science fiction movies where the aliens basically decide they're going to conquer Earth and just nuke us from space? I mean, okay, granted, in Independence Day, they nuked us from right above the cities, but still, you understand what I'm getting at here. But anyways, I am once again rambling off in completely unrelated directions. But again, comes back to what I've constantly praised this show for, is that they have bringing in villains who are smart, who have strategies, who have plans, who have beyond their powers something very formidable that they can throw at their heroes. And this, of course, forces the heroes to be even more smart. That's just really, a smart villain forces a hero to be smart, to up their game, rather than just turning it out into a giant wrestling match. And while just having a good old-fashioned hero and villain punch each other for a while, scene or story or whatever, is fine from time to time, but ultimately it's only got so much mileage you're going to get out of that. Smart opponents are capable of delivering virtually any type of story you want, and again, it really forces the hero to bring their very best, to constantly be reaching, striving to improve themselves, and all of that makes for good drama, good characterization, good storytelling all around. Let me see. Speaking of smart villains, how in the world did the villains know that Miss Martian and Lagoon Boy were going to be coming out of that particular teleporter at that particular moment? I mean, literally, Tigress and Deathstroke are just sort of posing dramatically on top of some stuff in a junkyard when the Lagoon Boy and Megan stroll out of that rather TARDIS-like shed. I mean, I know this is one of those things we're probably just not supposed to think too much about, and okay, I'll certainly grant them this is really how they knew to be there, is certainly probably not all that important to the story, but it's one of those things that jumps out at me, so I thought I'd mention it. Now let's briefly talk about Deathstroke. We don't really have him saying all that much this time around. He is played by Wentworth Miller, best known for the show Prison Break. I never actually got around to watching that show. I've heard it's very good. It's on my to-watch someday list. But here we definitely do see Deathstroke sporting a rather questionable haircut, in my opinion. But otherwise being quite the badass fella and laying a really nice smackdown on Lagoon Boy. So I have the feeling this is going to be a very worthwhile portrayal of Deathstroke, and I do like that we finally get to see an animated version of Deathstroke where he is called Deathstroke. That was really one of the few very big marks against the old Teen Titans show, was that they chose to refer to him as Slade. Now, I understand why on a kid's show you might not want to throw around the word death too awful much, but it's the 21st century. I think it's okay to be a little bit more sophisticated than that. But what's done is done, right? Okay, so let me see here. Actually, I think that covers everything that I really had to say about this episode. Again, lots of balls in the air, lots of interesting stuff going on. We are seeing both the villains and this just the writing in general on the show being very smart. And I know I'm repeating myself, but I absolutely love it when a show treats me, the viewer, as an intelligent person and writes to me that way. And this is the really great thing about this show, is it really is tailored to be accessible. You can put this in front of a group of elementary school kids and they'd probably think it was great, just for the superhero-y action stuff. And not that kids that age are certainly not above appreciating characterization and all that. Make no mistake, I'm not saying that at all. I know that to be completely and utterly false. But you can also have, the adult audience look at the show and really get a genuinely sophisticated and intelligently written show that will leave them, not feeling like they've been wasting their time watching a kid show, basically. This is a very good example of, well, I don't know if I maybe label it all ages entertainment. I tend to think of things like The Sims or maybe Harry Potter as all ages entertainment. But here it's a show that has a very broad appeal in terms of its writing. So let's leave it at that. Anyway, folks, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at HoosierJedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.